The chandeliers inside the River Cafe glowed like suspended diamonds, reflecting off the Manhattan skyline as if the entire city were holding its breath. Trevor Langford leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of vintage Cabernet, one hand resting arrogantly on the thigh of Sloane Whitfield, the woman he'd abandoned everything for, including his wife, including the unborn child he swore wasn't his. Tonight, Trevor thought he was untouchable. Tonight, he believed no one could humiliate him. Tonight, he was wrong. Because the moment the maitre d' stepped aside and the restaurant doors opened, Trevor's smirk collapsed. There she was, Madison Rowe. His ex-wife, 6 months pregnant, and she wasn't alone. Walking beside her was Damian Sterling, the most feared, most respected CEO in all of Wall Street. Tall, impeccably dressed, carrying the kind of quiet power that made every other executive shrink. The entire restaurant shifted, whispers slicing through the air. Even the violinist missed a note. But Trevor, he froze completely. His glass trembled in his hand. Sloane's smile faltered as she followed his gaze and saw the woman they had spent months trying to erase. Madison didn't flinch. Not this time. Not after everything. Her black maternity dress framed her small frame, elegant and understated. Her hand rested lightly over her belly, the subtle curve that Trevor had once mocked. But tonight, under the warm restaurant lights, it made her glow. Damian leaned close, guiding her forward as every head turned. His presence alone said one thing. Madison was no longer alone, no longer weak, no longer the woman Trevor could crush. Trevor's racing heartbeat thundered louder than the ambient music. His empire, his lies, his carefully built reputation, suddenly felt paper thin. And when Madison's eyes finally met his from across the room, he knew his nightmare had just begun, and she hadn't even opened her mouth yet. Before the night she walked into the River Cafe with Damian Sterling at her side, Madison Rowe had lived a life most people never noticed, a life of quiet suffering, bruised dignity, and battles she fought alone. Just a year earlier, she had been the woman who slipped silently into her midtown office every morning, clutching a worn leather tote and a lukewarm Starbucks cup because she couldn't afford another late fee on her credit card. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't bold. She was simply hard-working. And that was exactly why Trevor targeted her. Back then, Trevor Langford had seemed untouchable. Sharp suits, Mont Blanc pen, Mercedes S-Class, the type of man who snapped his fingers and watched entire departments shift. When he first paid attention to Madison, she mistook manipulation for affection. He made her feel chosen, needed, protected. The truth was far darker. Trevor didn't choose her because he loved her. He chose her because she was easy to control. Their marriage started cracking long before she realized it. The first red flag was subtle. Trevor insisting she handled the housework, even though she was working full-time. Then came the gaslighting. He would disappear from meetings, return smelling of unfamiliar perfume, and accuse her of being insecure. The final blow came when she told him she was pregnant. Instead of joy, Trevor offered suspicion. "Are you sure it's mine?" That sentence fractured her heart in a way no betrayal ever had. A week later, Trevor filed a complaint with HR claiming Madison had emotional instability due to pregnancy hormones, pushing her out of the job she'd worked 5 years to build. Insurance gone, income gone, reputation damaged. And yet, life wasn't done testing her. Her younger brother, Ethan, born with a neurological disorder, required new medical treatments. Bills piled up. Madison found herself working part-time in a tiny Queens library, shelving books while trying not to faint from exhaustion. Nights were the worst, crying quietly on an old futon, scrolling through apartment listings she couldn't afford, whispering apologies to the baby she feared she couldn't protect. She hid all of it, from co-workers, from neighbors, even from herself. But the universe has a strange way of bringing light into dark corners. The first spark of that light was the man she didn't know would change everything. Long before Trevor Langford became the CEO who strutted through Wall Street with a Rolex glinting beneath tailored sleeves, he had learned one lesson the hard way. Power was the only thing people respected. He grew up in a crumbling New Jersey townhouse, raised by a father who walked out and a mother who used bitterness as a weapon. She reminded him daily that men were disappointments, that love was a liability, and that trust was for fools. Trevor absorbed it all. He promised himself he would never be the weak one. By his mid-20s, Trevor had clawed his way into the finance world. Internships, connections, favors, anything to get a foot in the door. He wasn't the smartest analyst in the room, but he was the most ruthless. He stole credit, manipulated teammates, whispered lies in boardrooms. Step by step, betrayal by betrayal, he climbed higher. And then he met Madison. At first, he saw her as a relief from the exhausting mask he wore every day. She was gentle, loyal, forgiving, qualities he interpreted as weaknesses he could mold. He liked how she believed in him, how she defended him, how her eyes softened even when he snapped. He liked the power of being adored without question. But admiration turned suffocating when you fear someone sees too much. As Madison grew more capable at work, Trevor grew more threatened. He couldn't let her be more respected, more brilliant, more valued than him. So he did what he always did. He took credit for her ideas, minimized her successes, joked that she was cute when she tried too hard. It worked for a while, until she got pregnant. That terrified him more than any business risk. A child meant responsibility, vulnerability, someone relying on him the way he once relied on a father who never came home. Trevor didn't want history repeating itself, so he made a decision. Push her out before she could ruin the perfect empire he was building. He convinced HR she was unstable, whispered rumors she'd sabotaged company data, and made sure she walked out with nothing but a cardboard box and a broken heart. To Trevor, it wasn't cruelty. It was strategy. What he didn't know was that the strategy he used to destroy Madison was the same one that would one day destroy him. If Trevor Langford was a man built from ambition, Sloane Whitfield was a woman sculpted from pure hunger. Not hunger for love, respect, or stability. No. Sloane craved elevation. She wanted to rise, no matter who she stepped on during the climb. In a city like New York, ambition came in many shapes. Hers came wrapped in flawless skin, perfectly blown-out hair, and a wardrobe curated to attract the wealthiest man in any room. She grew up in Dallas, in a suburban home where appearances were everything. Her mother taught her how to smile through discomfort. Her father taught her nothing at all, because he was rarely around. Sloane learned early that beauty opened doors faster than resumes did, so she weaponized it. She moved to Manhattan at 21 with nothing but a suitcase, an Instagram following, and a talent for reading powerful men like open books. Trevor was just another chapter. The first time she met him at a charity gala, she knew instantly he was married, his ring still fresh with polish, his smile brittle. Married men were the easiest targets. They were bored, eager for validation, desperate to feel young and chosen again. Trevor was no exception. Within weeks, she had him wrapped so tightly around her finger that he didn't notice she had quietly taken over his life. But Sloane never fell for his charm. She fell for his power. She loved the business dinners at Michelin star restaurants, the designer gifts, the luxury hotel suites with panoramic skyline views. She loved the way people stared when she walked beside him in silk dresses that shimmered beneath chandelier lights. and she especially loved the secrets Trevor whispered into her ear. Secrets about the company, about investors, about Madison. Every piece of information was another step on her ladder. The one thing she didn't expect was the pregnancy. Not her own, Madison's. That changed everything. Madison's unborn child wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a threat to Sloane's future, a threat to her place in Trevor's world, a threat to the lifestyle she'd fought tooth and nail to secure. So she doubled down, fed rumors, forged alliances, even planted doubts in Trevor's mind until he believed the baby wasn't his. And as she sat across from him at the River Cafe that night, she thought she had won. But the moment Madison walked in with Damian Sterling, Sloane felt the first crack split through her perfect world. Damian Sterling was not the kind of man who noticed people easily. He lived above the noise. Penthouse meetings, boardrooms lined with glass, midnight calls with Europe, a life balanced between power and isolation. But the first time he noticed Madison Rowe, she wasn't stepping out of a luxury car or presenting at a corporate summit. She was sitting alone in a quiet corner of a Pier 17 cafe, laptop cracked near the hinges, fingers trembling as she typed formulas into a spreadsheet. He recognized the look in her eyes instantly. Not weakness, resolve. The kind that only forms after surviving battle after battle with no witnesses. He didn't speak to her that day. He simply watched her gather papers that kept sliding out of her worn folder, watched her inhale shakily before pushing forward again. Most people walked past her without seeing a thing. Damian saw everything. Months later, when he discovered Trevor Langford's firm was building its entire forecasting model on a mysterious algorithm with no credited designer, he wasn't surprised. He knew Trevor. He knew the type. Men like him stole whatever shined brighter than they did. Damian's suspicion turned into certainty the moment he compared the algorithm's style to the scribbles he remembered seeing on Madison's table that day. It was hers, without a doubt. He didn't intervene, not yet. Damian Sterling never moved without calculating the impact 3 steps ahead. But he watched. He gathered proof. And the more he uncovered about Madison's termination, the HR complaint, the rumors Trevor spread, the more something sharp and unfamiliar twisted in his chest. Anger. Not the cold kind he felt during negotiations. This was personal. It had been years since he felt anything personal. But fate has a way of crossing paths when both souls are ready. 2 weeks before the night at the River Cafe, Damian walked into the small Queen's library to return a book on behavioral economics. He didn't expect to see Madison behind the counter, hair tied in a low ponytail, a hand resting protectively over her pregnant belly as she thanked an elderly woman for a donation. She looked exhausted. She looked strong. She looked nothing like the broken woman Trevor had painted her to be. He approached her desk. She looked up. Their eyes met again, this time long enough for something to settle between them. Damian Sterling knew then. He wasn't just going to help her. He was going to change everything. The River Cafe was the kind of place people whispered about, where proposals happened under fairy lights and billion-dollar partnerships were sealed over hand-pressed linen. But that night, the air felt different, heavy, electric. Charged with a tension that made even the waitstaff move more carefully, as if stepping around invisible fault lines. Trevor Langford didn't notice any of it. He was too busy performing, laughing too loudly, holding Sloane's waist like she was a trophy, boasting about the expansion fund he planned to secure. He had no idea Destiny was already walking toward him in black heels. Madison stepped into the doorway, hand instinctively placed over her belly, as Damian Sterling guided her forward with a quiet, protective presence. The maitre d' stiffened. He recognized Damian instantly. But it was Trevor who reacted, as if someone had ripped the floor from beneath him, his fork, hit the table with a clatter. Sloane followed his stare and paled. The restaurant's murmurs grew louder. That's Madison Rowe. Wasn't she his wife? Look, she's pregnant. Isn't that Damian Sterling with her? Trevor shot up from his chair, knocking over a glass that splashed red across the tablecloth like spilled guilt. Sloane grabbed his sleeve, hissing under her breath, but he yanked away, chest tight, breath short. "Madison!" he barked. Too loud, too desperate. Every head turned. Madison froze for a heartbeat. It wasn't fear, it was memory. Every cruel word, every gaslighting argument, every night she cried alone echoed in the space between them. But she lifted her chin, shoulders straightening as Damian's subtle touch steadied her. She didn't walk toward Trevor. She walked past him. That small act, barely a few steps, humiliated him more than any slap. Trevor's voice cracked. "We need to talk." Damian stepped slightly in front of Maddie, his tone so controlled it sliced through the tension. "She doesn't owe you anything." The room throbbed with shock. Sloane burned with jealousy, her lipstick-perfect mouth twisting. Madison finally spoke, her voice soft but devastating. "Trevor, I'm done letting you talk at me." Trevor's face drained of color. He wasn't losing her. He had already lost her. What he was losing now was much worse. His image, his control, his fear-built kingdom. And everyone in the room had just witnessed it crumble. For a man who spent years mastering control of markets, of boardrooms, of people, Trevor Langford had never looked more out of control in his life. His jaw clenched, chest heaving, eyes flicking between Madison and Damian like a cornered predator. The restaurant's warm candlelight suddenly felt like a spotlight, exposing every insecurity he'd buried beneath designer suits and inflated ego. He tried to regain composure, straightening his jacket, forcing a smile that wobbled at the edges. "Maddie," he said, voice dropping to a wounded whisper. "You can't just show up like this." Madison didn't even look at him. "I didn't show up for you." The word slapped harder than a hand ever could. Damian's gaze stayed locked on Trevor, steady, unflinching, the way a seasoned negotiator observes a man who's about to lose everything. Trevor hated that look. It made him feel small, replaceable. "What is this?" Trevor scoffed, laughter sharp and panicked. "You're with him now? Seriously? Is this some kind of revenge stunt?" Damian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You assume Maddie's choices revolve around you. That's your first mistake." Sloane's nails dug into Trevor's arm. "Trevor, sit down. You're making a scene." But Trevor couldn't sit. Not when the room felt like it was turning against him. Not when investors were whispering. Not when Madison's calmness felt like a mirror, reflecting everything monstrous about him. "What did you tell him?" Trevor snarled, stepping closer. "Did you lie to him the way you lied to me?" Madison blinked slowly, tired of the narrative he always clung to. "You lied to yourself. I just stopped covering for you." A waiter hovering nearby stepped back, sensing the emotional explosion building like a storm cloud. Even the bridge lights outside seemed to flicker, as if the universe itself recoiled from Trevor's unraveling. "You think you can just walk around acting innocent?" Trevor spat, his voice cracking. "You ruined my career, my reputation," Damian cut in sharply. "Your reputation ruined itself." "That's what you don't get," Madison added softly, her hand resting protectively over her belly. "You destroyed everything long before I walked away." For a moment, silence stretched across the table like shattered glass. Then Trevor, voice hollow, desperate, murmured, "Maddie, don't do this." But she already had, and the entire room knew it. For most of her life, Madison Rowe survived by making herself smaller, quiet, agreeable, never taking up more space than she was allowed. But that version of her was gone. The woman standing in the river cafe that night was carrying more than a child. She was carrying truth. And truth, once spoken, has a way of shaking the walls of even the strongest liars. The entire room waited for Madison to crumble under Trevor's accusations. They expected tears, apologies, defensiveness, anything that confirmed the narrative he'd created about her. Instead, she breathed in slowly, steadied her shoulders, and let the storm pass around her. Because the real storm was inside Trevor. She knew him better than anyone. She knew that the louder he yelled, the more terrified he was. Trevor wasn't angry at her presence. He was terrified of what it meant. Terrified, she looked stronger without him. Terrified, she had survived what he intended to destroy her with. Terrified Damian Sterling, the one man he could never manipulate, was standing beside her. Madison's fingers grazed the edge of the table as she passed, grounding herself. "Trevor," she said softly, "you don't get to define me anymore." The words didn't shake. They didn't plead. They simply existed, unapologetic and firm. Trevor's face tightened. Confusion flickering where arrogance once lived. "Since when do you talk to me like that?" "Since you stopped deserving kindness," Madison replied, her tone gentle but devastating. Sloane scoffed. "Please, you're acting like some saint. You walked out on him." Madison turned her head, her voice almost tender. "No, Sloane. I walked away from what was killing me." Sloane faltered, caught off guard by the clarity in Madison's eyes. Damian stepped closer, not touching Madison but standing near enough to make a statement. "She doesn't need to defend herself to either of you," he said, cool and razor-sharp. Trevor's nostrils flared. "You think you can swoop in and fix her?" Madison answered before Damian could. "I didn't need fixing. I needed freedom." A murmur swept through the crowd. Even the lights on the Brooklyn Bridge seemed to shimmer brighter, as if the universe were nodding in approval. Trevor opened his mouth to spit another accusation, but the power dynamic had shifted. Everyone could feel it. Madison wasn't the fragile woman he'd thrown away. She was the one walking out of the fire, unburned. If Trevor was unraveling, Sloane Whitfield was detonating. Nothing terrified her more than losing control of a room, especially a room filled with CEOs, investors, and society elites whose attention she fed on like oxygen. And right now, every single one of them was staring at Madison. Not at Sloane, not at her expensive dress, not at her perfectly curated life. At Madison, the woman she had worked so hard to erase. Sloane's fingers tightened around the stem of her wineglass as she leaned forward. Voice dripping with poison disguised as sweetness. "You know, Madison," she purred, loud enough for the entire section to hear. "Most women would have some shame. Showing up like this, dragging your pregnancy around like a sympathy card." A few diners gasped. Trevor stiffened. Even he wasn't ready for Sloane's cruelty to go that far. Damian's expression didn't shift, but the air around him did. Sharp, dangerous. Madison stayed calm, her eyes steady, one hand resting lightly on her belly, as if shielding her child from Sloane's venom. Sloane wasn't finished. "I mean," she continued, laughing softly, "you can't really blame Trevor for moving on, can you? Look at you. Pregnant. Jobless. Emotional. Honestly, you should be grateful he ever gave you attention in the first place." The room fell into a stunned silence thick enough to choke on. Then Damian moved. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Sloane," he said, each syllable precise, "there's something you should understand." She turned toward him, attempting a flirtatious smirk, an instinct she would regret. "You see that algorithm Trevor built his entire expansion fund on?" Damian asked calmly. Sloane blinked. What about it? It wasn't his. Damien's gaze slid toward Madison, who stood quietly beside him. It was hers. A ripple went through the restaurant. Whispers, stunned breaths, the sound of a reputation beginning to crumble. Sloane's smile cracked. That's ridiculous. Trevor would never. He already did, Damien replied. And the proof is sitting in his own company records. Trevor's face drained of color. Sloane turned on him, voice trembling. You stole her work? And you didn't tell me? The shift was instant. Suddenly, Sloane wasn't attacking Madison anymore. She was attacking Trevor. Do you have any idea what this does to my image? She snapped. To us! Trevor flinched, realizing, too late, that Sloane only stayed loyal as long as the luxury did. And tonight, Madison had just pulled the first thread that would unravel their entire facade. For years, Trevor Langford believed his greatest talent was winning. Winning contracts, winning clients, winning people with charm that looked polished but was rotten underneath. But in the River Cafe that night, as the truth about Madison's algorithm snapped through the room like a live wire, Trevor felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Real fear. The kind that punches the air from your lungs and leaves you standing in a spotlight you can't escape. At the table beside them sat Charles Remington, the venture capitalist Trevor had been courting for months. A man whose signature could launch Trevor's expansion fund into the stratosphere. Trevor had orchestrated everything, reserved the best corner table, arranged the timing, even chosen Sloane's dress to complement the lighting. Everything was perfect, until Madison walked in. Charles leaned back in his chair now, watching Trevor with the cool detachment of a man reassessing an investment. Is what Sterling said true? He asked calmly, tapping the edge of his Mont Blanc pen against the tablecloth. Trevor swallowed, hard. It's a misunderstanding. She wasn't stable. Damien cut him off. Her firing was a cover-up. You knew her work was better than yours, so you buried her. Charles raised a brow. And you based your entire fund on stolen intellectual property. Trevor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Sloane didn't rescue him. She was too busy calculating how quickly she could distance herself before the fallout scorched her next opportunity. Across the room, a reporter from a finance magazine quietly slipped out her phone. Trevor noticed, and panic snapped through him. Charles, he said, forcing a smile that split under pressure. Don't listen to this. Sterling is exaggerating. He has a vendetta. Damien didn't blink. I don't need a vendetta. I have documentation. Charles set down his pen with a soft click, the sound more final than a slammed door. Then I'm withdrawing my offer. Langford Capital is no longer a secure partner. Trevor gripped the chair to steady himself. It was happening. The deal he built his future on, gone. The reputation he curated, cracking. The control he depended on, slipping through his fingers like spilled wine. Madison watched silently, her expression unreadable. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply witnessed the consequences unraveling exactly the way destiny intended. Trevor whispered, almost to himself, "This can't be happening." But it was. And it had only just begun. The moment Charles Remington withdrew the deal, the entire restaurant seemed to tilt. Conversations halted. Silverware stilled. Trevor swallowed his pride like broken glass, while Sloane's expression soured into something sharp and calculating. But Madison, she felt something far more dangerous than satisfaction. Her body shifted. A wave of pain rippled across her abdomen, subtle but unmistakable. She inhaled sharply. Steadying herself on the back of a chair, Damien noticed immediately, eyes narrowing with concern. "You all right?" he murmured quietly. Madison forced a nod, but her breath trembled. She had been under tremendous stress. Days of poor sleep, cheap meals grabbed between shifts, walking miles because she didn't want to waste money on cabs. And tonight's confrontation was more than emotional. It was physical. The adrenaline, the tension, everything was tightening inside her like a warning. Trevor, for once, actually noticed. "What's wrong with you?" he demanded, voice laced with irritation instead of care. Damien stepped forward, protective instinct flaring. "She's in pain. Step back, Trevor." But Trevor didn't move. He never moved unless it benefited him. Pain? Oh, here we go. Another dramatic performance. "You always exaggerate." Madison flinched. That tiny reaction, that flash of discomfort, finally silenced him. Damien didn't hesitate. "We're leaving. Now." He placed a steady hand on Madison's back, guiding her toward the exit just as another surge of pain tightened around her belly. She bit down on a gasp. Not here. Not in this room full of eyes. Not where Trevor could twist it into another accusation. But her body wasn't giving her a choice. Trevor followed them a few steps, panic flickering beneath the arrogance. "Madison. Maddie, wait. What's happening? Is the baby?" His voice cracked on the word, baby, as if the reality of what he'd denied was finally clawing into his chest. Madison didn't look at him. She could barely breathe. The maitre d' rushed ahead to open the door. Cold night air swept in, hitting her like a tidal wave of clarity and dread. Damien slipped an arm around her shoulders. "Hospital. Now." The world blurred as they stepped onto the cobblestone path outside the River Cafe. The lights of the Brooklyn Bridge shimmered through her tears. She wasn't thinking about Trevor, or revenge, or humiliation. Only one thought echoed in her mind. Please, not my baby. The cold night wind wrapped around Madison like a warning as Damien guided her down the steps toward his waiting black SUV. Every breath felt tighter, sharper, as if her body were fighting to stay upright. Damien opened the back door, helping her ease into the seat, his movements calm but urgent. His voice was steady, low. "You're safe. I've got you." But before he could get in, Trevor appeared, breathless, shaken. The performative arrogance wiped clean from his face. For the first time in years, he looked human. Frightened even. "Maddie, wait," he said, voice cracking. Is the baby? God, just tell me what's happening." Damien blocked his path. "You're not helping." Trevor's eyes darted between them, his panic messy and raw. "She's still my wife." "Ex-wife," Damien corrected sharply. "And you lost the right to be involved the moment you abandoned her." Trevor ignored him, leaning forward to look at Madison in the back seat. "Maddie, please, talk to me. I didn't mean for any of this." Madison winced as another wave of pain struck. Sweat dotted her forehead. She clutched her belly, her voice barely a whisper. "Trevor, not now." That should have been enough, but guilt, real, suffocating guilt, was finally creeping up on him. It wrapped around his throat, squeezing until he couldn't breathe. The image of Madison in pain, the baby he had denied, the child he refused to claim. Suddenly, it all weighed on him like a collapsing building. "What hospital are you going to?" he demanded, desperation making him reckless. "I'll follow." "No," Madison said softly, eyes closed, tears slipping down her temples. "I don't want you there." The sentence shattered him. But before Trevor could respond, Damien got in beside Madison and shut the door. The SUV pulled away, tires crunching over the cobblestones, as Trevor stood helplessly in the glow of the bridge lights. Sloane rushed out seconds later, her heels clicking furiously. "Trevor, where are you going? You can't abandon me out here." Quiet, he snapped, shaking her off. His eyes stayed locked on the taillights disappearing into the night. For the first time, he felt it. The fear of losing something he could never replace. But Madison wasn't thinking about Trevor. She wasn't thinking about revenge or justice. All she could think was, hold on, baby. Please just hold on. The ride to the hospital blurred past in streaks of city lights. Madison leaned back against the leather seat, one hand gripping Damien's sleeve as another wave of pain tightened her breath. He didn't speak. He simply held her steady, his presence a calm anchor in a night spinning out of control. But once the doctors took her inside for monitoring, Damien finally exhaled. He scrubbed a hand across his jaw, the tension in his shoulders hard as steel. Trevor's face kept replaying in his mind. The panic, the guilt, the desperation, and each image sharpened Damien's resolve. He waited in the quiet of the dim hospital hallway until the doctor stepped out, assuring him that Madison and the baby were stable for now. Stress-induced contractions, not uncommon, but dangerous if ignored. Relief hit him like a punch. 10 minutes later, Madison lay in a private room, pale but breathing easier. Damien sat beside her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen. She opened her eyes, voice hoarse. "Is the baby okay?" "Yes," he said quietly. "You both are." Tears pooled in her lashes, silent, exhausted tears she didn't have the strength to hide. "That's good," she whispered. "That's all that matters." Damien hesitated for a moment. Then he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim folder. "Madison, there's something I need to tell you. Something you deserve to know." She frowned slightly. "What is it?" He placed the folder in her hands. "I've been investigating Trevor's expansion fund for months. His numbers never added up. And the algorithm he used, the one he claimed he developed himself." Madison froze. Her hands trembled before she even opened the folder. "It was mine," she whispered, already knowing the answer. Damien nodded. "Every line of code, every model, every projection. He stole it, Maddie. He built his empire on your genius." Her throat tightened. Anger, betrayal, validation, all crashing into her at once. Damien continued, his voice controlled but edged with fury on her behalf. "I have emails he deleted, drafts in your writing he saved under his name, timestamps proving you created every piece." Madison's breath hitched. A sob caught between heartbreak and vindication. He destroyed my career with something I built?" Damien leaned forward, eyes steady. "No. He built his downfall with something you built." The truth didn't break her. It rebuilt her. Madison Rowe had spent years shrinking herself so Trevor Langford could shine. But in that hospital room, under the soft glow of fluorescent lights, everything shifted. She wasn't just a woman recovering from stress-induced contractions. She was a woman holding the truth, her truth, in her hands. And truth had never felt so powerful. Hours passed. Damien stepped outside to make calls while Madison rested. But she couldn't sleep. Not with the folder lying open on her lap, filled with lines of code she'd written on late nights, with sticky notes Trevor once said were too messy for a real analyst. He'd stolen her work, her brilliance, her future, and then he'd painted her as unstable to justify it. She had lost her job, her insurance, her confidence, and nearly her child, all because Trevor feared she would outgrow him. Now she finally saw it clearly. Trevor had never been afraid of losing her. He was afraid of being less than her. Footsteps pulled her from her thoughts as Damien re-entered the room. He carried a warm cup of tea and a softness rarely seen in Wall Street executives. "You should drink something," he said gently. "Your body's been through hell." Madison accepted the cup, warming her hands around it. "Thank you," For everything. Damien hesitated, then took the seat beside her. You don't deserve what happened to you. And you deserve more than recovering quietly while he continues climbing off your work. Madison exhaled slowly. What do I even do, Damien? I'm pregnant. I'm broke. My reputation is trashed. I can't fight him. Yes, Damien said, unwavering. You can. And you won't be doing it alone. She looked up, searching his eyes. Why? Why are you helping me? A beat of silence. Then Damien said the words that would mark the start of her rebirth. Because I believe in you more than you've ever been allowed to believe in yourself. Her throat tightened. Damien leaned back, voice calm but resolute. I want you on my team. My company needs someone with your intelligence, your intuition, your integrity. I'm offering you a position, full benefits, full protection, and a salary Trevor could only dream of giving you. Madison stared at him, a mixture of disbelief and hope swirling in her chest. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a future, Damien corrected softly. One you control. For the first time in months, Madison felt a spark, a fire deep inside her that had been smothered for too long. Not revenge, not rage, strength. While Madison was slowly rediscovering her strength in a hospital room, Trevor Langford's world was collapsing in real time. He stood alone outside the River Cafe, ignoring the cold wind slicing across the Brooklyn waterfront. His mind raced. His deal was gone, his stolen algorithm exposed, and the image he'd spent years polishing was slipping out of his grasp. But worst of all, he couldn't shake the memory of Madison's pain. For once, he felt something dangerously close to remorse. Sloane Whitfield did not share that feeling. She stormed out behind him, arms crossed over her designer coat, heels clicking with fury. Trevor, what the hell was that? He didn't look at her. Not now. Not now, she snapped. Your ex-wife humiliates me. Damien Sterling humiliates you, and you're telling me not now? Trevor swallowed hard, refusing to show how rattled he really was. This isn't about you. Oh, it is, she hissed. Everything you built, the lifestyle you promised, the connections you bragged about, it's all tied to that expansion fund. And you just watched it evaporate. Trevor clenched his jaw. I'll fix it. No, Sloane said, stepping closer, her voice icy. You won't. For the first time, Trevor finally saw the truth in her eyes. Sloane had never loved him. She loved what being with him gave her. The dinners, the penthouse, the invites, the status. Without those things, Trevor was just another mistake to cut loose. You don't understand, he whispered. I might lose everything. Sloane let out a humorless laugh. And why do you think I'd sink with you? Trevor's breath caught. We're a team. We were, she corrected sharply. But I don't date men on the verge of financial ruin. She pulled her phone from her purse, already texting someone. Someone Trevor didn't recognize, but instinctively knew was wealthier, safer, more useful to her. Are you serious? He asked, voice cracking with disbelief. She shrugged. You gambled my future on stolen work from a pregnant woman. If anything, I stayed longer than you deserved. Trevor stepped toward her, panic creeping back into his voice. Sloane, don't do this. She leaned in, her whisper cold enough to freeze the night air. I'm not Madison. I don't stick around when things fall apart. Then she turned, disappearing into a waiting town car without a backward glance. Trevor stood frozen on the sidewalk, his deal gone, his mistress gone, his lies exposed. And for the first time, he realized the truth. He had destroyed everything with his own hands. The morning after the River Cafe disaster, Trevor Langford sat in his penthouse office overlooking Lower Manhattan. But the view, once a symbol of victory, no longer comforted him. He hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie hung loose, and his eyes were bloodshot from hours of spiraling panic he couldn't outrun. On his desk, 3 voicemails blinked red, all from investors, none sounding positive. He pressed play. "Trevor, I'm pulling out until the allegations are addressed. Langford, this mess is bigger than you think. Fix it or we're done. We need answers by noon, or our lawyers will be contacting your board." Trevor slammed his fist onto the desk, rattling the glass awards he'd spent years chasing. His empire, built on numbers manipulated to look clean, now looked rotten under the harsh light of truth. He tried to breathe, but then another call came in, this time from his CFO, Alan Green. He answered quickly. "Alan, thank God. Tell me you've stabilized things." Alan's voice was stiff, formal, too formal. "Trevor, we need to talk. In person." Trevor felt the floor drop beneath him. "Why? What's happening?" "The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. We found irregularities in the expansion fund audit, and Sterling Industries submitted a formal inquiry to the SEC. Trevor's world spun. "Damien filed a complaint?" "Yes," Alan said. "And the documents he supplied match the discrepancies your team couldn't explain." Trevor's mouth went dry. "Alan, listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. I can fix this. I just need time." "You had time," Alan replied quietly. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about the entire firm." The call ended. Trevor stared at his reflection in the window. The city moved below him, alive and indifferent, while his career collapsed in slow motion. Then came the knock at the door. His assistant stepped in, face pale. "Mr. Langford, the press is downstairs. They're asking about the stolen algorithm." The words sliced through him like ice. Stolen. Algorithm. Madison's genius. His theft. His betrayal. He sank into his chair, gripping his hair, breath shaking. For years, Trevor believed he could control every narrative. Now the narrative was controlling him, and he was losing. Not money. Not deals. Everything. While Trevor's world was imploding from the top down, Madison Rowe sat in a warm office inside Sterling Industries, wrapped in a soft blanket the nurse had insisted she take home. Her body was still weak from the scare, but her eyes, calm, focused, unshaken, held a new fire. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was planning. Damien knocked gently before stepping in, carrying a folder thicker than the one he'd given her at the hospital. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired," Madison admitted, "but clear." Damien nodded with a hint of pride. "Good. Because what I'm about to show you is the key to taking Trevor down legally, publicly, and permanently." Madison sat up straighter. "I'm ready." He laid the folder on the table, opening it to reveal color-coded tabs, timestamps, certified email logs, metadata trails, evidence meticulously collected and irrefutably tied to Trevor. "This," Damien said, pointing to a string of emails, "is proof he accessed your private drive at 2 a.m. the night before he presented your algorithm to his board." Madison swallowed. "He waited until I was asleep." "He waited until you trusted him," Damien corrected gently. "And he used that trust to steal your future." Madison's breath trembled, but she didn't look away. Damien continued. "We're filing an intellectual property theft claim, a wrongful termination case, and a SEC whistleblower report. Once this goes public, Trevor won't just lose his job. He'll lose every ounce of credibility he's ever clung to." Madison stared at the pages, at the proof of years of manipulation, and felt something shift inside her, a piece of her heart stitching back together. "But Damien," she said carefully, "if we do this, it's going to get ugly. For me. For the baby. Damien's voice softened. You won't be standing alone in any of it. I'll be beside you, every step. For the first time, she believed him. He wasn't helping her out of pity. He wasn't trying to rescue her. He was offering partnership, respect, a chance to reclaim everything Trevor tried to erase. Madison nodded slowly. Then let's finish what he started. Damien allowed himself a rare smile. Good. Because the board hearing is tomorrow morning. And it's time Trevor learns what happens when the woman he underestimated decides to stand. Madison exhaled, steady and strong. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. The next morning, the sky over Manhattan was a muted gray, the kind of color that warned of storms long before the rain arrived. Inside Langford Capital's towering glass headquarters, the storm had already begun. Executives hurried through the lobby with stiff shoulders and lowered eyes, whispers trailing behind them like nervous smoke. Everyone knew, everyone had heard. Trevor Langford was done, and the board meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. would either bury him quietly or publicly. On the 42nd floor, the boardroom buzzed with tension. Sleek mahogany table, leather chairs, a skyline view Trevor once used to impress clients. Today, it made him feel small. He sat at the far end, hands clenched so tightly, the veins rose against his skin. The door opened. Damien Sterling walked in first. Then Madison Rowe followed. Calm, composed. Her baby bump visible beneath a tailored black dress Damien's assistant had picked up for her that morning. Her presence silenced the room in an instant. Some board members shifted uncomfortably. Others watched with thinly veiled curiosity. A few avoided eye contact completely, already preparing to distance themselves from Trevor. Trevor stood abruptly. Why is she here? Damien answered before Madison could. Because she is the rightful owner of the intellectual property your company built its expansion on. A ripple went through the room. Trevor's voice cracked. She's lying. Madison opened the folder and placed copies in front of each board member, her movements steady. These are timestamps, drafts, and metadata proving I created the Langford forecasting model. One man frowned. Mr. Langford told us you were unstable, that you fabricated your involvement. Madison met his gaze steadily. Then you were lied to. Another board member flipped through a document, eyes widening. These emails. Trevor logged into her personal drive. Damien stepped forward and used her work to raise $32 million in investor capital. The room went cold. Trevor's voice rose hoarsely. She's doing this because she's bitter. Because she hates me. No, Madison said softly. I'm doing this because you stole from me, and because you almost destroyed me. Silence. Then the chairman spoke, voice firm. Trevor Langford, effective immediately. You are removed from all executive duties pending formal investigation. Trevor's breath hitched. You can't, and, the chairman continued. We will cooperate fully with the SEC investigation filed this morning. Trevor staggered. SEC. Investigation. His worst fear. Madison didn't smile. She simply watched as the man who once crushed her stood alone in the ruins he built himself. For the first time, Trevor finally understood what it felt like to lose power. When Madison stepped out of the boardroom, the weight she'd carried for years lifted. Slowly, then all at once. It wasn't victory that washed over her. It was relief. Pure, aching relief. The kind that makes your knees weak and your eyes burn. Damien walked beside her, close enough to support her if needed, but far enough to let her feel her own strength. She had earned this moment. She had stood in front of Trevor, in front of the board, in front of the people who once believed his lies, and she told the truth. And the truth had finally spoken back. They reached the lobby of Langford Capital just as the morning sunlight cut through the glass walls, illuminating Madison like she was stepping into a new life. A few employees whispered, watching her with wide eyes, some recognizing her, some realizing the stories they'd heard were wrong. She didn't shrink away this time. She didn't lower her head or hide her hands. She simply walked, steady and confident, hand resting over the life inside her. Outside, the Manhattan air felt different, lighter, warmer. Damien studied her quietly. "How do you feel?" Madison exhaled, a shaky breath, but a free one. "Like I can finally breathe," he nodded. "You did something very brave today." She gave a small smile. "I didn't feel brave. I felt tired of being afraid." "That's what bravery is," Damien said softly. "Doing it anyway." A taxi honked somewhere down the street, but the world around them seemed to slow. Madison looked up at the towering building she once entered with fear. Today she walked out with dignity. It wasn't revenge she felt, not satisfaction, not triumph. It was peace. For the first time in years, peace. Suddenly her eyes filled with tears. Silent, overwhelming tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed. Damien hesitated only a second before gently pulling her into an embrace. She didn't resist. She let herself lean into him, his steady presence grounding her. "You're safe now," he murmured. "It's over." But Madison shook her head lightly. "No, it's not over." Damien pulled back, brows furrowing. "What do you mean?" She wiped her cheeks, voice soft but resolute. "It's not over. It's beginning. My life. My real one." Damien's expression warmed, slowly, deeply. And for the first time, Madison let herself believe it. After all the pain, she had earned a future worth living. 1 week after the boardroom reckoning, Madison Rowe stood on the rooftop terrace of Sterling Industries, overlooking the Manhattan skyline glowing gold under the setting sun. The city that once made her feel invisible now felt like a place she finally belonged. The wind brushed her hair gently as she rested one hand on her belly, feeling the faint movements of the life inside her, a reminder of why she had survived everything. Behind her, the rooftop door opened. Damien Sterling approached, dressed in his usual tailored suit, though tonight his expression was warmer, less guarded. "You're early," he said. "I wanted to see the skyline," she replied softly. "It reminds me how small my problems used to make me feel, and how big my world feels now." Damien stepped beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "Your settlement with Langford Capital is finalized. You'll receive full ownership credit for the algorithm, compensation, back pay, and the SEC is moving forward." Madison exhaled, bittersweet but relieved. "Trevor will face consequences." "He already is," Damien said. "He'll never work in finance again." For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the justice she'd long been denied. Not revenge, just the balance of truth. Then she turned to Damien. "Thank you. For everything. You did this," he said. "I only stood beside you." She smiled, the kind of smile that came from strength rebuilt, not borrowed. "Still, you were there when no one else was." Silence settled between them, warm and gentle. Then Damien cleared his throat, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Madison, there's something else." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Not a ring, but a delicate bracelet. Gold with a single charm shaped like a tiny star. "This isn't a proposal. Not yet," he added with a slight smile. "It's an invitation to a life where you don't have to carry everything alone. With me, if you'll have that." Madison's breath hitched. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from pain this time, but from healing. She placed her hand over his. "I'm not ready for marriage," she whispered. but a future with you. I could be ready for that. Damien nodded slowly, tenderly. Then we'll build it together. Madison looked out over Manhattan again, her heart steady. She had lost everything. She had been broken, abandoned, betrayed. But now, she had a career. She had safety. She had her child. And she had a man who saw her worth before she saw it herself. For the first time in her life, Madison Rowe truly believed this truth. She wasn't just starting over. She was finally starting right. And just like that, our story comes to an end. But hey, my wonderful friends, you're still here with me, aren't you? If you've stayed all the way to this moment, then something in Madison's journey must have touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it reminded you that healing isn't loud. It's not sudden. It's built little by little, with every choice to stand back up. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle is the way," and Madison's story is living proof of that. The very things meant to break her became the things that rebuilt her. Life will hand us betrayal, heartbreak, loss, but it also gives us the strength to rise, the courage to walk away, and the clarity to choose better for ourselves. As the Stoics say, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Madison found that power again, and so can you. If this story stirred something in you, hope, strength, maybe even a tear, then don't let it fade. Hit the like button, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe so you and I can keep walking through these stories together. Because you matter. Your healing matters. And somewhere out there, a better chapter is already waiting for you. Before we wrap up completely, I want to take a moment to make something clear for YouTube and for all of you wonderful viewers who stay until the very end. The story you just watched is a work of fiction, created purely for emotional storytelling, reflection, and entertainment. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is entirely coincidental. Our goal here is not to report real-life situations, but to craft meaningful narratives that spark thought, empathy, and inspiration. These characters, their conflicts, and their healing journeys are written to help us explore universal feelings we all experience: loss, resilience, love, and growth. So please enjoy this content as a dramatic tale, not a factual account. Thank you for supporting the channel and for understanding our creative purpose.